know what to call it.
All right.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome. This is great. I am actually really excited. It's been something that I've been interested in starting for a long time.
Yeah. I'm excited to be part of it.
That's-
Seriously, very seriously. So
That's awesome. All right. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, we did something last week, and it wasn't streamed or anything, so we haven't finished cutting it up, but so what if we call this the first episode?
yeah, sure.
We call it that?
We can call the last one the prequel.
There you go.
And then this is episode 1.
I love it. Actually, also one more thing. We're gonna record this over there too.
Oh,
You know,
perfect.
it's being recorded there, but
Good call.
you know. All right. So, John and Alex,
Yep.
we're going to be doing a lot of things here, but specifically, we want to be talking about marketing and automation and business. And it's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
I am very passionate about these things, and I know that Alex is too.
Yes, we share that. We've got that in common. So maybe we call it the marketing and business and everything show.
One of the things that I do love about Alex Hermosi, and he's talked about this several times, is that, you are your niche, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to necessarily limit to, marketing and business and things like that, but those are the things that I love talking about. And,
Yeah.
and so, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. No, I think that's perfect. And I think as we go on, a lot of podcasts, I know this is a little bit more dynamic than a podcast because we're doing short form content and video content and things like that. But I think the statistic is that I think it's like almost 80 or 90% of podcasts fail before the 7th episode. And so I think of like, and I've seen a lot of people start episodes and they try to figure out some perfect niche, some like silver bullet of like, oh, I'm going to set it up this way and it's going to be perfect and I'm going to call it this. But then they get a couple episodes in and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I also want to talk about this, but I named it this. And so now I just got to go back on myself and now I got to start over. But then we know that they never start over. And so that can be a big reason why people get like that paralysis, I think, when it comes to execution, because they think they have to have some perfect niche.
Right. And they don't necessarily see the success within the first 7 episodes. So then they just like stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, let's talk about that.
okay.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think one of those things, because that's a principle in general. It's not just with podcasts. I think anyone that's given a shot to entrepreneurship, or even if it's anything at all, if you want to take a crack at something, chances are you're not going to see results after the first 7 repetitions. It's
Right?
it's like, if you want to try to run a marathon and you go run 7 times, you probably still won't be able to run a marathon. Same thing goes for making $1 million. You could sell 7 clients or try 7 different businesses and you still maybe haven't even made it yet. But
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's a fascinating concept. And one of the things I love that Alex Hermosi talks about is we're going to have to figure out how to do that, because we're going to talk about Alex Hermosi a bunch and we're going to talk about you a bunch. And should we just call him Hermosi?
yes, Hermosi. Okay, that's good.
Right,
I'm
sounds
not
good.
Alex Hermosi, for those of you who don't know. Different Alex.
Yeah, no. But one of the things that he talks about a lot is, do something enough times it's unreasonable for you to not fail. Right?
Yeah.
And I love his story where he goes through and he's talking to a mentor and he's like, how did you, advertise some of your stuff? What are some of the tactics that you were doing? And his mentor was like, oh, I put out flyers, and so Alex is like, oh, I can do flyers. So he goes out, he puts out, 300 flyers on windshields and things like that. And then he leaves and he comes back after a week, and like one person called him and was like, you scratched my car. And so Alex is like, this didn't work at all.
Yeah.
And he goes to his friend or his mentor, and his mentor is like, What do you mean? Like, we did $5,000 flyers as a tester, and then we did $5,000 a day for the next month to get those results.
Exactly.
You know, like
Exactly. No, it's insane. And there's a great book about that called The Compound Effect. I don't know if you've read it, but
No, I haven't.
it talks about the magic penny. And it asks, they take this survey of people and they say, okay, you can either have $1 million today, or I'll give you a penny on January 1st, but that penny is going to double every day for 31 days. Which one would you take? And a lot of people are going to take the $1 million. But if you look at, maybe it'll take a minute for me to pull up, but if you look at the magic, I think if you just Google the magic penny, let's see what comes up. I believe there's a calculator that, here we go. There's even a Forbes article about it, so we can reference them. But if I ask you if you want $1 million or a penny that doubles every day, you're probably going to say you want the $1 million. But the power of compounding effort, whether that's in advertising and marketing, or whether that's in any kind of physical training or emotional training or relationships, anything like that, the compound effect is extremely powerful. So if you take the $1 million, you get $1 million today. But if you take the magic penny that doubles every day, it turns into, do you want to guess how much?
Oh man.
In 31 days?
I've heard this before, and I know it's a lot more than $1 million. And so it's like, is it like 10 million?
It's $10.7 million. $10.7 million. But here's the thing. Until day 15, it's still under $200.
Isn't that nuts?
Isn't that interesting? So you think of people that try anything and they don't see results for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 10 weeks. But then all of a sudden, week 11, it looks like overnight success. And that's the same thing goes for the magic penny. It goes from $5 within, at day 10, it's $5. And then day 20, it's $5,000. But then day 31 is now $10.7 million. And there's the other analogy I've heard is about bamboo, right?
Right.
Bamboo looks like an overnight success, right? Where it just shoots up in a couple of days. They say like
grows like a foot a day,
right? And you can literally stand there and watch it grow. But it takes years of growing its roots, right? So these people where you think they're an overnight success, there's actually years of effort going into that, and then all of a sudden it's just like this click, and then they skyrocket. So really interesting.
I honestly feel like Alex Hormozi that's like, because I kind of have had my pulse on this space for a minute, and I didn't hear anything about him except for like last 2-3 years.
Right.
And he's only, he says that he started a business like 8 or 9 years ago. And it's only been in the last 2 or 3 that I've come to.
And he's been doing his podcast for about as long as his business, hasn't he?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just recently that he's made it to like the top charts on selling books and podcasts and things like that, which is incredible. Yeah. Incredible. There's Atomic Habits, if you read that one.
It's right there behind your head.
Oh, there we go. Atomic Habits. So Atomic Habits talks about, I can't remember the principle. They've got a fancy name for it, but he talks about the idea of an ice cube, melting an ice cube as well. And this is kind of in the same area of having these kinds of breakthroughs. The ice cube, if you increase the temperature from 3 degrees Fahrenheit to 4 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing's going to change. Same thing goes from 4 degrees Fahrenheit to 10 degrees to 20 degrees. Yes, you're increasing the temperature in the room, but nothing's going to change to an ice cube on the table, right? Even you go up another 10 degrees, you're at 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and that ice cube is not going to change. But then all of a sudden, when you pass 32 degrees Fahrenheit, then all of a sudden the ice cube's going to start melting.
Right.
But that doesn't discredit the gap between the starting temperature and where you're at now. But there was all of a sudden that breakthrough of that plateau, and it's just like that consistency. There's no way to get past 32 degrees if you're not daily increasing that, incrementally.
That's fantastic thoughts. It's a fantastic book, and I love where he talks about 1% gains, right? And having that ability to like learn from every situation, I think, is so important, right? I was working with my coach, Colby, the other day, and recently I went through an experience where I didn't feel like I had gotten as much value out of a situation as I wanted out of that situation. And so one of the things, and it's a little similar, but we're a little bit of a tangent here. And one of the things that he was talking about is there is always value in every situation, and it's up to us to go through and extract the value from that situation. And so one of the things was I was thinking about a situation in terms of the things that I perceived as I wasn't receiving, right? And I was discounting all of the other things that were in that realm to start with. And so as we started to make a list of all of the things that I did get out of the situation, it was astounding how much was actually there. And so as we're going through our experiences, one of the things that I love talking about is there is no failure, there's only feedback, right? And what's curious about that is we get to choose what our feedback is. Like we get to pick out hey, this is the thing I want to learn from this situation that maybe wasn't 100% perfect, but
right.
So isn't that an interesting experience though? I should get to the right camera here. Isn't that an interesting experience though? Is being able to know that with everything that you're working on, everything that you are working on creating, you have the opportunity of learning from every one of those mistakes, every one of those pieces that is, moving your temperature up 1 degree and not seeing something happen, and continuing to be able to learn from all of those experiences because they're all really important, right? Yeah. You still have to get the temperature up past 32 degrees to see any success.
Right.
Right. And so if we are disappointed because we are going from, 10 degrees to 20 degrees, if we're disappointed because we're not being able to see the growth that is happening, it's a great opportunity for us to stand back and say, okay, well, what did I actually learn from that experience?
Right.
I can choose to be disappointed or I can choose to learn from it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. It's that internal dialogue. And I think sometimes I've been thinking about this so much lately about that feedback. How do we change that feedback? If every time I do something and it just feels like it sucks, why is that? And how do I change that? And it comes to, I've been calling it self-reputation, but just the reputation you've got with yourself.
I love that.
And that's at least how it works for me, where my best tool to help reprogram some of those reactions I have to maybe, I don't want to call it negative, but an outcome that is different from what I designed or what I desire. And as I've been thinking more about okay, what's my reputation I have with myself, and how much do I actually believe in being able to absorb information and absorb kind of the proper learnings out of that situation. And so I've been thinking of things, okay, how can I improve that self-reputation so I can build my confidence to a point where no matter what happens, I can feel calm and confident that I'm absorbing all of that knowledge and experience and learning, right? There's no failure, only feedback. How do I turn that into feedback? I've got to have the reputation with myself and believe that I can actually absorb that, or it's just going to feel like a waste of time.
Right.
So that's kind of step one.
Do you feel like that's kind of where the imposter syndrome comes in? Like a lot of people don't believe themselves. They don't believe that they're going to be able to affect the change that they're telling other people they can.
Right.
And then because they don't believe it, then they're unable to actually go do that.
Right? Yeah. No, that's so important. And you think of, I think our reputation is incredibly valuable. But even more so than our reputation with other people, if I say I'm going to do X, Y, or Z and I go and do that, or maybe I don't, right? That's where my reputation comes into play. But I think our personal, that self-reputation is exponentially more important, because that self-reputation is going to reflect in the relationship I have with other people all around me. And so, yeah, that's exactly it.
That's cool. So do you have any ideas on, or any thoughts that you've gone through? How do you work on improving your self-reputation?
Yeah, perfect. So, um, I've been doing this thing lately, and we talked about this a little bit just last week. But one of the biggest things for me is just picking one thing every day that I'm going to do that's a little bit uncomfortable, or that I know there might be a little bit of resistance towards, and doing it anyways. Doing it no matter what, rain or shine. Whether I wake up feeling depressed or wake up feeling excited, that's one thing I'm going to do. For me, that's going on a walk, and we've talked about that.
Right.
I call it the daily stride. And doing that every single day has dramatically improved my self-reputation. And I believe in myself and believe that, okay, I've done this for 20 days now, where I wake up and do something first thing in the morning, even when it's snowing, even when it's like below freezing and still raining. I don't know how that works. I feel like that should be snow at that point, but that's what happened yesterday. I was out in the rain, and it was freezing cold, but the satisfaction that comes from that, not only, the health benefits of walking, we can talk about that another time, but the satisfaction of sticking to something that I told myself I was going to do, and I went and did it. Like it's a healthy ego boost.
Sure.
Right. And there's some types of ego boosts where it's like, okay, you don't need that ego, like the Lambo or whatever, but that self-reputation, now I feel more confident when I'm, talking to marketing clients and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell them I can do that for them, or I can do this for them, then I automatically believe that a little bit more, because I know I can fulfill on the things I say I'm going to do. Right.
Right.
And so that in turn is going to boost my external reputation as well as my internal reputation. So anyways, extremely powerful.
That is awesome. I saw a reel the other day from Dan Martell, and he was talking about just this, right?
Cool.
He has a list of non-negotiables that he goes through, and they're non-negotiable. It doesn't matter what's happening in his life. It's going to, that thing is going to happen. And he said that for him, his list is, he's going to always exercise. Doesn't matter what day, it doesn't matter what, he is going to go through and exercise. Right. I'd have to go back and look at exactly what all of the ones that he has, but one of them is feeding his body correctly. Right. So having good nutrition and things like that. And that's one that I feel like is very difficult for me. I'd love to go through and figure out how to get really delicious food. I love food. I mean, just honestly,
don't we all?
I love food. And so I think that there is a way to get good, delicious food that is healthy, and I haven't figured it out yet. I'd love to at some point figure that out.
One day. It might be in this life. It might not be in this life.
Right. But yeah, so for him, he exercises every day, rain or shine, snow, no snow, whatever. And, recently he's finished several ultra marathons.
Wow.
And that is, amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and you can see the confidence that he has. He's like, no, I'm going to be doing this every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after watching his thing and after talking to you, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to start with one thing. Like, and here's one of the pitfalls that I've run into in the past. I found, great apps that like track you every day. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to run every day, and I want to do this every day, and I want to eat an egg every day. And I have like this big list. It's a pretty big list of things that I want to do every day. And then, a week goes by and I'm still on it, and 2 weeks goes by and some of them are still happening. Right. And so, and then like, I feel like it's kind of gone in the reverse where, it's not like, I haven't been able to do the thing. And so then I'm like, oh crap, I fell off.
Yeah.
And then it kind of doesn't, like, it's negative for that same ego boost. Right.
Yeah.
And so, this time, after we were talking, I was like, all right, well, what's something I can do, just one thing, singular thing that I can do every day. And I loved what you talked about of getting outside and doing some exercise. And so for me, it's traveling 1 mile.
I like that.
And so sometimes that's running, sometimes that's walking. And I hope that over time I get faster at doing that. And I hope that I get longer. But, David Melcher talks about, getting, his goal is just put on his running shoes and running clothes. That's the goal for him.
Right.
Because then the next step is to go do the exercise. And he's like, I've never put on my clothes and not gone exercising.
Right. Yep.
And so for me, it's, I would like to go at least 1 mile. And so far for all of December so far, I've gone at least 1 mile.
Great.
And so like, I'm excited because I'm like, all right, like one thing, I'm going to do this really well. One thing. And after a month or two, I mean, obviously I live my life, but, after a month or two, then we'll see about adding something else.
Adding the next thing. Yeah. See, and I think that right there has cracked the code as to why people, I think I can't remember the statistic, but I think it's like 80 to 90% of people that set New Year's resolutions will lose it by springtime. Like they won't stick to their resolution by springtime. So I don't even know when spring starts, like March or April, whenever. And 80 to 90% of people that set New Year's resolutions, they're not going to stick to it, which is astounding to me. But I think just like that small, like one step at a time where, and this is where I bring sales into it. Some people are like, oh, he's going to talk about sales. Oh no.
It's part of this podcast,
but
right?
my number one, like one of the most, maybe most foundational aspects of sales, but least obvious sometimes, which is weird to say, but one of the biggest things in sales is the idea of making it easy to say yes to and hard to say no to. So if you want to be good at sales, do that. If you want to be good at starting habits, do that. Make it easy to say yes to and hard to say no to. So putting
Atomic Habits coming right in
there.
Yeah,
Atomic Habits talks exactly about that. I just put it in different words, right? Because it talks about, creating certain habit loops and things like that, but really easy to get started. So if the habit is just putting on your gym shoes and your gym clothes, that's it. That's easy to say yes to and hard to say no to, right? That's my principle.
So that's awesome. And I think that when we're talking about anything, whether that's sales or whether that's going running or whatever, all of those things, right? We need to put the reps in. We need to put the iterations of, hey, I started this thing and I finished this thing. I think a lot of times people will start something and they never get finished with it the first time.
Yeah.
Right. And so then because it's never finished, then they can't do a retrospective and say, hey, what went well with this?
Yeah.
What didn't go well? What can I learn from this for the next time I do this?
Yeah.
And I think that right there is a really important component, is that we need to like start something, we need to finish something, and we need to review what happened. And if we always are starting things and we never finish,
Yeah. Wow. So let me ask you this. How much risk have you taken in your life?
That is a great question. And
it's a deep question.
From whose perspective?
From,
because
like
from my perspective, like this is the only obvious choice.
Right.
Right. And so is there risk? Yeah, there's risk. But for me, is there a large amount of risk or a small amount of risk? And I would say it's small, right? Versus other people that I've had huge conversations with, like they wouldn't be caught dead being an entrepreneur,
right?
Like
because of the risk,
because of the risk, and so for them it's insurmountable,
right?
And so, I don't know. From
that's
my
really
perspective, I wouldn't say that I take a lot of risk.
And maybe that's how I've heard people have conversations about a quote unquote purebred entrepreneur. Some people are just born with it. I don't know how true that is, but the majority of people I see become successful in business or any kind of, even marketing and sales is how much risk can they tolerate? But the reason I wanted to bring that up and bring that into this conversation we're having about just like compounding effort over time is, how do you think that risk correlates with compounding effort? Because I feel like a lot of successful entrepreneurs, those are two skills that they leverage really well, are risk and compounding effort.
Yeah, that's a really curious idea. I think that there's I think it's just important to go back to, what kinds of risk are we talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm getting hung up on that a little bit, but like, so for example, I have a really hard time. I haven't really had a real day job for I don't know, a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I have the freedom to go through and plan my day and do whatever I want. I'm not saying that I'm super successful yet. I'm still, figuring out how to do all
Right.
these
Yeah.
things. But at the same time, I can't be fired,
Yeah. That's security.
right?
Yeah. That's super secure,
Um, and I mean, not saying that like I make a ton of money, but like I always pay my rent. So,
Yeah.
you know,
That's a good point.
there's that. And
Yeah.
so, you know,
Well, so I was listening to this little, indie documentary about Rockefeller.
okay.
And everyone knows Rockefeller. Everyone knows he was extremely, extremely successful. He says, and I actually, on a separate note, I was listening to a podcast with the gentleman that wrote the documentary about Elon Musk.
Okay.
And there was one trait that both of them shared just in the last week as I was studying Rockefeller and Elon Musk. Elon Musk being the richest man on earth currently, and Rockefeller being the richest man on earth, 150 years ago or however long ago it was. And that was about 20% of the things they did were complete failures. And Elon has a specific quote where he says, if you're not failing at least, 15 to 30% of the time, you might not be trying hard enough. And so that's when I introduce risk into the conversation. I think you've probably failed before, but even if you haven't seen it as failure, we talk about how failure really is just feedback, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt that a lot. You felt that a lot. Right. And I think some of the best entrepreneurs can reframe that failure and make it seem like feedback, but that doesn't make it any less of a failure, but they're still using that to succeed the other 80% of the time.
Right.
And typically that's where the real gains are made, that is from the learning you get from the failure and the vocabulary of famous saying, right? There's high risk, high reward, right? So if you're really willing to risk, maybe only 20% of it is really at risk of becoming a failure, but the other 80% has extremely high upside. So I think when you combine the compounding effort of maybe failing 20% of the time and being okay with that, that's the compound effect, right? And that compounding effort is sticking to that even when sometimes you're going to have hard times. Sometimes you're going to barely be able to pay rent, or not even going to be able to pay rent. But sticking to that and learning from that will make the other 80% that much more successful than the average person that isn't as risk, willing to take on risk.
And one of the things that I like about what you're saying here is the commitment to continue through the failure, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things, David Melcher talks about how in 2008 he lost $100 million, like through that whole process, he lost $100 million. And at the time, he was like, nobody's going to listen to me anymore because I'm a failure, because I lost that money. The opposite is true today, where people listen to him because he's lost $100 million. They listen to him because they're like, okay, well, he obviously knows what he's doing now because he's finished. He's figured out, I mean, not necessarily finished, but like he's figured out how to not do that again.
Right.
And I want to avoid losing that. So I want to learn from him so that I don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Well, and the funny part of it is, going back to the perspective, you were talking about the risk perspective, right? And you said, sometimes, just having that proper perspective. But if you think of it, you ask one person, how did, Rockefeller or Elon Musk or anyone that's made it financially, and become successful, you ask 100 people, and some people would say that's because they took a risk, and some people would say that's because of luck. And sometimes they can look like the same thing from the outside. But what would you say is the distinguishing factor between risk and luck from the external perspective? If I'm looking at you and asking you, oh, it kind of looks like luck, and somebody else says, oh no, he just took calculated risk.
I would say it's the number of times that you've tried.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
At least that's what comes to my head at the very first thing is like, hey, how many times did you try?
Yeah.
Somebody who's only tried once, and they, and that's the lottery, right? If you try once and you win the lottery, you're just lucky.
Yeah.
Right. If you try business 100 times and you failed 90 of them, are you learning correctly? Are you, anyway.
Yeah. As long as at least 1% of those, or at least 10% of that effort amounts to something. If 100% of the effort still goes to nothing, that's not educated risk. That's uneducated risk, right?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
unbridled ambition, maybe some would call it. And so I think that's really interesting as well with entrepreneurs. I see people trying to get into the business, get into the game, and maybe their biggest priority ends up becoming like wanting to take the risk, or wanting the, whatever they need to do in order to create that dream outcome so they can drive the Lambo. And they take risk after risk after risk, but they don't learn because they're trying risk in all these different, they're trying to do drop shipping and SMMA and car washing and all these different things. And they're never really committed to one thing. And then it's uncalculated risk. And then everything just ends up going, going terribly.
Have you talked? I mean, Alex Hormozy has his graph of, somebody says, "Oh, hey, here's a great idea," right? Mm-hmm. And so then they go up because they're really excited about this thing, right? And then they start going down into this valley where they're like, oh, this is a lot harder than I expected.
Right.
There's a lot. It's a lot more difficult than I was anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot more to this than just what was presented to start with. And after a while, then they're down in this dip here, and as soon as they get to the sorry, let me switch over. When they get to this dip here, then they're like, oh, this is really hard. They switch to the next thing, and so then they get up on this little high a little bit, and then they go down a little further. And if you always follow that same path, it's just a negative spiral. It only goes down because once you get to the bottom, then you try a new thing. And that's where the commitment to continuing is really, really important, right? It's really important that once you get to the bottom, you're like, hey, this is kind of difficult. You continue to figure out how to do the things, how, what is the standard operating procedure for how to do whatever it is that you're working on.
Right.
And then as you continue solving those issues, that's where you get the learning.
Yeah.
And that's how you get up to the top. And then you continue on. And like you were talking about, as long as that 10% of your effort is positive, that 10% of your effort can have outsized gains from what would normally be, a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what Atomic Habits talks about, those small improvements every single day. If you're just 1% better, then that's a dramatic amount. You won't even be recognizable in a year if you're just 1% better every single time. So I think that's super interesting. Anyways, thanks for answering my question about the risk and the luck. I think it's an interesting conversation. I think people that are trying to start the game of business, they have a hard time distinguishing between other successful entrepreneurs, whether it was luck or whether it was risk. And a lot of the time it was just calculated risk. And maybe people that are haters and say, oh, he just got lucky with his, and you see that in the comment section of successful entrepreneurs. He's just lucky. But I don't know. I don't personally know any lucky entrepreneurs. To me, they're all
it's all hard.
Yeah. You just pick your hard,
Right.
So
one of the things that I heard a story of is we, in a lot of ways, get to pick how lucky we are, right?
Mm.
And what I mean by that is they did a study a while ago, and people who, and maybe I'm reading into it a little bit, but people who, they would bring people into this study. It was in a building. They go to take all the questionnaires, and they would grade. People would grade themselves on how lucky they felt like they were, right? And after a while, after doing this thing, the people would leave the study, and they'd go out to their cars in the parking lot, and then they'd go off and do whatever. But planted between the outside doors and their car was a $20 bill or a $100 bill, an amount of money, right? And what was amazing is that 80% of the people who felt like they were lucky found the $80 or that
The dollar
money.
bill, yeah.
Yeah. The other people who felt like they were unlucky didn't find it and couldn't see the luck that was there, right? And so one of the frames that I like to come from is I'm already lucky, right? And I get to start like noticing all the places that I actually am super, super lucky. I mean, and it just is what it is, right? I was born in America.
Right.
Right. I was, born to a family of 2 college graduates. Right? My father was into business, and all of those things all play into the luck that I was given.
Right.
Right. But what's crazy and what's really fun is that every single person can go find how they are lucky. Right.
Wow.
Because you can go and you can say, oh, I'm lucky because the sky is blue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a contrived example, but you can go pick all of the things where you think you're lucky. And as you start to believe that you're more lucky, then that allows you to start noticing all of the things that affect the luck that you have in your business.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. So what you're talking about here is the idea that we can create our own luck, and that what a lot of people would consider to be luck is just a belief system.
Yeah.
And this would turn into a really deep conversation, but it's about programming our unconscious mind to pick up on certain bits of data that create a desired outcome. Right. And the desired outcome, it might be luck, but we can actually design what that desired outcome should be. And the more we achieve that desired outcome, people might think we're lucky, but for us, it's just design. That's just the way we designed it. Right. Which is really interesting. And maybe a lot of successful entrepreneurs share that belief system as well, where they don't even think it's risk, or even calculated risk. It's luck, or in other words, it's exactly how they designed it.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. That's really profound. I like that.
I love to work on reframing all of the things in my life, because I think that there is this space where we get to program, we get to create what it is that we want. And yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and I think the more you read books like Think and Grow Rich, right? I think that was written almost 100 years ago, Napoleon Hill, and he interviews all these successful people. And one thing that all of them had in common is they designed the reality. They designed the exact amount of money, right? Think and Grow Rich talks about this. You've got to design the exact number that you want in your bank account, right? You're going to design what you're going to do with that money. And when they design it and it happens, there's nothing in their mind that's like, oh, I was just lucky. No, that's exactly how they freaking designed it. Why would that be luck? And so I think these are principles that the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful, even, whether it's in business or in personal life or in relationships, you can design the outcome of that, right? And through compounding effort, right, combined with that,
Absolutely.
right? Because there's the some might call this a law of attraction, right, where you design it and then it happens what you design. Right. But the law of attraction means nothing if you don't have the law of action.
Right.
So not enough people are talking about the law of action. They just talk about the law of attraction. But it's two sides of the same coin, right? If you pick up one end of the stick, you've got to pick up the other end too. And that's the compounding action and effort that comes behind that certain belief system. And you're never going to be lucky, no matter how clearly you design it. You're never going to achieve that unless you have compounding action and effort to back it up. But those two things combined, you're unstoppable.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. No, I love that. That's a fantastic point, that we have to go through and actually do some things.
Mm.
And I think that in my life, that's probably one of the pieces that's held me back before, right? Is like, I think about like, hey, here's all the things I want to do. It's, I dream about it. I've designed it, but then I actually got to go do it.
Right.
Yeah. And so that is, I will say recently, in the last couple months, I felt a lot more congruent about documenting what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so prior to this kind of shift in my persona or whatever, a lot of what I did wasn't taking action because I didn't feel congruent with it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But as I was going through and doing, kind of some internal pondering, consideration, even you can even call it self-therapy, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
wherever you want. I started to realize that, I needed to be taking more action, and with that, posting more often, and just being open with, hey, this is who I am. This is where I've been,
Mm-hmm.
and take it or leave it. Here's the fun thing I made.
Yeah.
Yeah,
take it or leave it. So would you say in one way or another that's a calculated risk as well? Because if you put a piece of content out in the world, you could have some hater comment on and say, your beard looks really weird, man.
Right.
It looks so weird.
Your purple beard.
But you could have that. I think that's an incredibly calculated risk that I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to learn how to deal with. But at the same time, something that I'm designing for myself, as we've talked about this a little bit, and we'll get into this a lot more on the show as well, is on the content creation side of things. I've designed a certain type of audience that I want to reach, right?
Yeah.
And so when I reach that, it's not going to feel like luck to me, but I'm going to have to take very consistent steps, and I'm going to have to take some calculated risk. And sometimes that means sharing something that could be unpopular to other people, because there'll be haters.
Right.
But if I get haters, I know I'm on the right track somehow.
So I one of the things I love, and it's actually one of the reels that I'd love to review again later, as we continue to improve our process here. But basically, it says there are 10% of people, 10% of the population that's going to love what you do no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Right? Conversely, there's 10% of the population that will hate what you do no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Right? And there's 80% of the population who doesn't care.
Yeah.
And so what's really curious about that, and having that epiphany allows me to say, obviously, if there are people who are giving you hate, if there's people who are saying like, that's a terrible idea, what that means is that there's 10% of the people who are probably going to love it.
Yeah.
And so you're on the right track because you're making progress, right? And on top of that, I mean, think about if you could reach 10% of the population of Earth, how many people is that?
That's what, 800 million, or 800 million.
800 million, right? Do you think that if you could give a little tiny bit of value to 800 million people, that you would have all the money you could ever dream of?
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
And some.
And some, right? And so what's really important for us to be aware of is that we're not speaking to the haters.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to work on ignoring what they're saying, because they're not the target people that we want to be working with.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the target audience that we want to be working with. it's those select few people who love what we do because of our unique niche,
Yeah.
who we are. Those are the people we want to be working on connecting with.
Right.
Figure out where they hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what those problems are that they are experiencing so that we can work on solving those.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And the only way to find that out, to discover that bit of information, is by trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, right? And so the only way to figure it out is you've got to just give it a shot. And if that doesn't work, give it a shot again. And that's that compounding effort we've been talking about at the same time. Is you've got to take you've got days that are going to feel like failures. That's feedback, right? And that's how you're going to know exactly where your target audience is, what they want, what they fear, what they need. And you keep doing it until you understand that so clearly and so perfectly. And that's the people that have become extremely successful have figured that out. Is they've been able to weed out the distractions, weed out the stuff that they don't want to focus on by the continual effort. I think that's a sifting process in of itself.
I think it was the Michelangelo, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did the famous David statue.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked him, how did you know what to do? How did you how did you go through and build this statue?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I went through and I removed everything that wasn't David. Right. And so similarly, as we're going through the marketing process, as we're going through the process of building a business, we need to be working towards removing all of the things that are the fluff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Here's another interesting thing about that exact story too. And this is going to really deepen that analogy. But before he carved the statue of David, he actually spent hundreds of hours dissecting bodies. And maybe we don't want to get into this. This is a little too graphic for some people, but he would dissect bodies. He even broke into hospitals in the middle of the night to dissect bodies and to figure out the exact movement of different ligaments, so that as soon as he came before that block of stone that he wanted to carve away, he knew exactly, all of the details and the exact vision down to, a millionth of a millimeter. And that's because of all the reps he'd put in previously in his drawings, in his studies and things like that. And that's what made him such an incredible artist, I think. So,
right.
Wow.
And what's crazy is that some would say that his knowledge of the human anatomy rivaled the surgeons of the day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's totally true. In a little bit of a morbid sense, I don't know if it's completely appropriate to go break into a hospital, but don't try that at home. Right.
That's awesome. Should we segue into an ad segment?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So, both me and Gavin, Gavin's our other buddy, right?
Yep.
Both me and Alex here are, we have been using Go High Level for, I don't know, what would you say?
I've been using it for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
So, the reason that I think this is a perfect segue is, the one of the biggest impactors, or I don't know if that's even a word, or if that's the right word, but
sure,
one of the biggest changes in my business has been able to learn and understand key performance indicators. And when we're talking about this compounding effort, you can only, when I talk about the magic penny, the reason why it's so fascinating is you can see how quickly it grows. But if you want to see that in your business, you've got to have a way to watch it grow. The only way you can watch it grow is by having and tracking key performance indicators, right? And in this software, that's exactly what it does for you. Or, one of the many features is it can track those key performance indicators. So the posts, the texts, the emails, the phone calls, the bids, the estimates, all those types of things are tracked right within the platform, and you can look at your dashboard and see over the months or over the years, your compounding effort just and that's that reputation sometimes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I've also been using it for quite a while. I don't think I've been using it quite as long as you, because you introduced it to me, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You came and said, "Hey, have you been using this platform?" And I was like, "No, I have Calendly for that tool, and I have Active Campaign for this tool, and I have
Zapier to tie it all
tie
together.
it all together." And you're like, "Well, you could use this one tool,
Right.
and this one tool does all of those things."
Right. Yeah.
And so I was like, "Really?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and checked it out, and since then I've been building a lot of all of those different components that I had separately been making my clients pay for it even, right? I would be like, "Hey, I'll set up your Calendly, but you have to pay for it." Right? Because I didn't want to like mark them up for it or whatever. And it makes it really easy for me as as agency owner to go through and just say, "Hey, all of the tools that we need to do all of the automations, to do all of your different things, from a marketing agency perspective, they're all right here in this one under this one roof."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's been a godsend for me and my business.
Yeah.
And I love going through and bringing new people on and kind of showing them like, "Hey, here's all the things it does," and just the look on their face, like, it does all of that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've even spent time. I've paid for the service for other people, and the only problem with that is there wasn't enough perceived value with it, which was really interesting. But it was, I got to a point where I was like I was hook, line, and sinker. I was so excited and passionate about this software because I'd used, it condenses 6 or 7 or 8 of those items in your monthly subscription tech stack down to one single software. And so I was like, that's awesome. Like here are some partners I'm working with. I'll pay for it for them. And they wouldn't use it. Right. And it was like the most frustrating thing. Cause I'm like, well, it does all these things. It'll save you so much time. But sometimes it's as simple as just helping other people understand how powerful it is. So maybe that's one of the things that we're talking about now is how powerful, a tool like this is. Go High Level specifically is just awesome. It's amazing. And I don't think I would invest in it or use it to save money, although it could save you money. But the amount of more money that you'll make from it is much more dramatic than how much money it will save you.
What do you mean by that? Expand on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I use this for my clients. And when I set them up on Go High Level, I never talk about how much money it's going to save them, which is true because a lot of people are using Zapier and using some other CRM and some other, probably like Wix or something for a subpar website. And then they use Zapier to link all of it together. Zapier, if you don't know, it just uses webhooks to like connect one action on one platform to another action on another platform. And that oftentimes will become very expensive,
Right.
hundreds of dollars a month, even thousands of dollars a month. I've seen people pay.
Because for every single action that happens,
Yeah.
That costs a little bit.
Yeah. And that's not to mention the monthly subscriptions you're paying for all the different platforms, right? And so what this has done is condensed it into one single software, which is awesome. And I've even found to be more effective than some of the other, I've used like MailChimp and mixed with a website, mixed with, all linked with Zapier and it would drop sometimes it wouldn't work, but when it's all in one software, it's so much easier to make it work, right? But going back to what I was saying about how much more money it will make my clients, the people I work with, or made myself, is the types of features and that are in it and the way it's set up. I'm saving so much time every week, so I get to spend more time doing what I'm good at, which for me, I love working, on the phone with entrepreneurs and helping set up these type, coaching, consulting, those types of things, and making that happen. And when I'm using a software like Go High Level, I'm buying back my time. So I'm not trying to build out all of these different things at different places in different ways and complicate it. It's in one simple solution, and I can use templates. I can use, I can just copy and paste things. I can use AI, whatever I need to compound the amount of money I can make with the fixed amount of time I have in a single day, right? So I'm effectively earning more time in a single day.
That's awesome. One of the things that I love about it is that, and this is where I thought you were going with it, is that Go High Level's focus is making you more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so you don't have to worry about, saying, hey, this is going to save you so much money, because what would you rather do? Would you rather, save a ton of money or make a ton of money?
Right.
Right.
Oh,
And both of those are important.
Right.
But I want to be making a ton of money, and I want to be making a ton of money for my clients so that they feel great about me.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly it. And that's the conversation of, that I've had with some of my clients, where it's like, just understanding what their needs are. And 90% of small business owners' needs revolve around getting more clients, making more money, and having more time.
Yeah.
Because they either are already working 70, even 80-hour weeks, or they don't have a consistent lead flow, or sometimes they're not charging enough for their service. And that's some of the consulting.
That's some mindset stuff.
Yeah. And I've been able to clear that up, help create some pricing structures. I know you do that for your clients as well. Right. And so the service is all about making more money, because I don't care much for pinching pennies, because that's not my ideal client. I don't necessarily, if you want to go pinch pennies, maybe this isn't the show for you, but we want to make massive impact and make a lot of money doing it, and that's the name of the game for me. So
fantastic. So what is the offer for today? And we talked a little bit about this beforehand. The offer that let me switch over here. The offer that we want to do for today is, we're so excited about the software. We want to give away 2 3-month subscriptions for Go High Level, totally free.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's up to $900 worth of value, or even more.
Right.
I've some clients, I'll, depending on the type of service we build out, you're looking at $500 a month, or sometimes even $300 a month. And so that's a huge value. That's like $900 worth of value for free.
So what do they tell us, what does somebody have to do to get considered for winning this, or getting access to this?
So what we want them to do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we need some engagement. We want you guys commenting down below. Share this on your social media platforms, and I want you to tag other people in it as well. So the more people you tag, I think the more inclined we would be to choose a specific person, or maybe more entries. We'll use some AI to randomly pick a person or something like that.
Right.
And so the more interaction we can get, and the more shares.
Subscribers.
Subscribers.
Subscribe to the show. We're going to be doing this show weekly, weekly, and we're very excited about it. We think it's going to be a fantastic experience. So, subscribe to the show. Subscribe. Go ahead and leave us a comment and say, Go High Level, if you're interested in getting Go High Level, and that would be, and then we'll contact the winner, and let's showcase who won next week.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay.
That sounds awesome.
That's so great. All right, do we have any closing words? Any thoughts?
I think that's the one thing I had written down that I wanted to talk about today, was the risk versus luck. Okay. And that's just I think they're doppelgangers. Risk and luck are doppelgangers, right? But take the risk, but even better than taking the risk is creating your own luck.
I love it. No, that's fantastic. Create your own luck.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys. We'll see you.